Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. When I said I returned from my hiatus, I meant it. I'm going to try to stick to a more consistent upload schedule. I'm a lazy piece of garbage, but the people want what they want. Now, today's story is a rather satisfying one. An entitled player gets exactly what they deserve. Without further ado, let's dive into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This story is titled, Entitled Druid Gets Vaporized. I just want to start by apologizing about the length of this post. I can't remember every incident to the exact detail, but this is how I stopped our group from being held back by the most argumentative player I have ever had to play with. So myself and a friend of mine loved D&D, and really wanted to start playing again. So we started up a new game with some friends that we knew were also interested. We have a session 0, and everyone turns up. We have a lot of players, something like 7 or 8. Now, there were a lot of people in this game, so we'll just focus on myself, DM, and Druid for this story. I had enough bad experiences with her alone, but she had similar issues with all the other players. We all turned up with the intention of helping out the new players to this group, as most of them had never played, and if they had, it was a game or 2 at most. So we all roll up, apart from the Druid. She has her character sheet prepared. She actually has multiple sheets created. She just really enjoys building characters, which of course is a big part of the game, and most of us love it. No real red flags came up. I roll up one of my personal favorite characters I have ever made. A Goliath Barbarian that is strong as he is stupid. Wow! I've never seen a character like that before! He had a lot of quirks and a backstory I put some reasonable time into. The other characters melded well, despite the size of the group. Well, all except one. Session 1. So we start off doing some menial tasks for a rebel magic force, trying to help them free the land. We have to track down and help a princess that is important to our organization, and save her from the large mercenary force that has surrounded her keep. We silver tongue our way past the mercenaries, and convince them that we are a neutral force that can get past her guards with false documents, and that we can retrieve the princess for a price. We entered the keep and helped rally the forces inside before we took on the entire camp. We annihilated them, and it was a great and epic feeling for our first-timers. We captured the leader, a halfling who was from some noble family, and he told us that if we killed him, his family would send down an army 10 times the size of what we just defeated. The group huddled and discussed ideas. We didn't want to release him because he'd go home and tell his family who we were, but killing him also seemed too risky. Now, I'm not sure how we reached this conclusion, but our plan ended up being keeping him prisoner, disguised as the princess, in a barrel of fish. Yeah, that seems like a plan a D&D party would come up with. Back to the story. We didn't think it was a good plan, but we reasoned that if we were stopped by a vast army, we could bargain him off for our safety. There was only one problem. Druid didn't like this. All the other players were encouraging this plan, but she interjected and started to argue that this was ridiculous and demanded we let him go. She stopped us progressing to argue against the plan for it being stupid and unrealistic, but everyone seemed to be having a great time with it, the DM included. We ignored her and continued while she just grumbled. We became irritated and didn't reply much, so we ended up calling the game. This was the first big red flag. We were just having a laugh and being silly for what was the first session for a lot of people. We were having fun and messing around. So session 2 rolls in, and we are all excited to sit down together and get started. The game starts out reasonable, everyone's getting back into the swing of things. The group is happily moving along, some sort of encounter comes up, I can't remember the details. I think there was an overturned cart or something. So anyway, we planned to take the cart. I would pull it, and the other characters could take turns riding in it. Druid didn't like this either. A person couldn't pull a cart, not over a long distance, and not for a sustained period of time. So I suggested that she could always wild shape into a horse and pull it in shifts. This was so below her, and she took it as an insult and became aggressive. DM ruled that due to my size and strength, I could pull a cart with something like 2 party members in it at a time. We were all happy, and we continued with the cart. At some point, we took a rest and needed to eat. So while everyone was pulling their provisions, snacking on dried meat and bread, I opened up the barrel that contained the fish princess, pulled out one of the fish we had left in there, and took a bite out of it. I couldn't tell you why, but Druid lost her shit.
Ha! You're dead!
She shouted through a villainous smile. I'm sorry, what? I replied, pretty puzzled by the whole situation.
That fish had been in there forever with that halfling. Anyone that eats it would die.
I'm a little bewildered at this point, and look towards the DM for an explanation. He looks back at me, a half-cocked smile across his face, not really knowing what to say either. DM, would you like me to make a save? Sure, why not? Make a con save. Being an absolute mountain, even by Goliath and Barbarian standards, my constitution was a whopping 18. It was my highest stat because I was good for walking into traps and being ambushed first. We had a lot of squishy PCs. So, I made the save easily. Yeah, you eat the fish, your stomach grows a little, but you've eaten way worse. A resounding
No!
came from the other side of the table.
That fish would be rotting by now. It would have too much bacteria on it.
I got pretty impatient at this point. A really big deal was being made over a small moment of comedy for the party. It fit in well with my character's general attitude and his upbringing, which also helped with my reasoning. Druid, it's a fantasy game. It's not real life. Chill out.
No, you did something stupid, and you should die. I know better than you. My dad's a doctor.
She snarled, seemingly seething at this point. Laughing in her face was probably the wrong reaction. I didn't realize your dad was an expert in the field of Goliath anatomy. Not gonna lie, I was pissed at this point. DM intervened and somewhat doused the flames of this fire. The session ended pretty soon after. Before Game 3, every other player besides Druid had either approached myself or one of the other PCs. We eventually decided to have a chat without DM and Druid there. We all agree that Druid is really starting to tread on a lot of toes, and that most moments of spotlight and planning are starting to be not just overshadowed, but enveloped by Druid's stubbornness and unnecessary confrontation. She will stop entire conversations just because she didn't like where the idea was going, and tried to quash any creativity from party members that wasn't hers. It became super tiresome, and we eventually approached DM. He told us that he would talk to her, and not to worry. Ho ho ho. If my experience with RPG horror stories has taught me anything, this is the part where you should start worrying. Games 3 and 4 went by. We had started to recruit some people to help build the rebel army, when suddenly the big bad evil guy burst into our hidden base and ruined everything, killing the leader of the rebels right in front of us. We ducked out, knowing full well that he had just dispatched the most powerful ally we had, with nothing but a few waves of his hands. We got captured and had some big escape. Our favorite NPC died in the ensuing fight for our lives, but we recovered his body and buried him. This is a compressed version. A few things happened in our sessions. We usually got together and spent the entire day with each other, as we had become really good friends. Throughout the sessions, Druid tried to pick holes in the plans of other players. She'd be passive-aggressive a lot of the time until we just agreed with her. But we mostly just side-eyed each other and carried on with our plans, determined to not let her ruin our fun. We approached the DM again after Game 4. We were really starting to get annoyed by her, and her character's constant need to try and belittle other players. We told him that we had given her 2 whole games to improve, and that if she doesn't want to play nice, we don't want to play. He assured us that he had spoken to her again and made it abundantly clear that she couldn't keep acting like this, because it was upsetting people. We didn't feel optimistic. DM was a really great guy, but he didn't like confrontation. So he refused to even contemplate the idea of her not playing. He wouldn't just kick someone out. I'm gonna go ahead and interject in the story here real quick and give my 2 cents here. Unfortunately, one of the hardest parts about DMing is the fact that you are not gonna please everyone, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. You kind of got to be a hard ass, and if you need to kick a problem player, then you need to kick a problem player. End of story. It's hard, I get it, but it's necessary. Anyway, back to the story. Game 5. We have started building ourselves up again. We've found the son of the now deceased leader of the rebel forces. He's trapped in a tower that he can't leave, but he knows of an ancient weapon that could possibly have enough power to strike down the big bad evil guy. We all rally up to search for this weapon. We find out where the dungeon is, we start marching, and we didn't stop until we reached the tomb we were looking for. Okay, that's a lie. We all stopped to buy little wooden animal tokens from a sweet little blind lady who had a hut on the side of the road. Anyway, we got to this ancient tomb and delved inside. There was some sort of invisible humanoid running through the tomb and causing issues. We tracked it down with its footprints and saw that they led to a well. At the bottom of the well was an elemental. We started launching various things down at this well at the elemental. It was going okay. We were having a lot of fun taunting this thing while it angrily made guttural noises at us, but we eventually ran out of disposable missiles. I flicked through my inventory and saw that I had a fish barrel. Eureka! What I had failed to remember was that the fish princess halfling was still stuffed inside. The barrel tumbled down the well with an echoing scream before a thunderous crash, and the sound of the barrel splintering into millions of tiny pieces, utterly destroying everything inside. I have to admit, that one was on me. My bad. But that was the only thing that I did accidentally in that game. This was an important thing to remember later in the story. Honestly, I just feel bad for the elemental. I mean, just imagine just chilling in your living room, and then a frickin' fish just hits you in the back of the head. Like, I'd be pissed off too. Back to the story. The druid, of course, got very annoyed with me. This never would have happened if we had just listened to her. She made that crystal clear. I was a bumbling idiot that couldn't do something right. With an intelligence score of 6, memory is not one of my character's strong suits. But really? She wanted to see stupid, I would show her stupid. I climbed up onto the edge of the well, grabbed the bucket that was being held by a thread of rotting rope, jumped into the air and put both of my feet into the bucket. DM said it was big enough, don't worry. And I hurtled down the well at incredible speed. The rope, of course, snapped with little resistance, and I crashed down on top of this elemental, actually managing to hit him with enough force to finish him off. I took a lot of damage, but it was worth it. I knew that the sheer stupidity of it would annoy her beyond measure. I was loving it. She kicked off with the usual stuff about how we should always listen to her, and that I had proved it by killing off that NPC and nearly myself to boot. I just sat back and let her fly. I was satisfied. I know this is pretty crappy behavior on my part, but trust me, this isn't even half of what I was capable of yet. She had been making jabs at us throughout the session individually, but at me more so than anyone else. She hated the way I played my character, and she hated it even more that my character was so loved by the other PCs. I was the most experienced player and role player at the table, so naturally I tried to draw everyone else into roleplay, and it had gone super well. I'd become the best friend of the bard, the rogue rode around in my basket on my back, etc., etc. By me doing this, it meant my character had a lot of in-game moments with the other characters that built bonds with them, and encouraged them to be creative. Druid just felt like an edgelord who always seemed to get really high checks and saves, even on low rolls. She often pushed other characters out of the way to try and outshine them with her vast array of abilities, and roleplayed very little. Even when she did, it seemed to be to demoralize other people's characters, or tell them that she was superior in some way. So anyway, we find out that there's actually a huge cavern at the bottom of this well, and everyone climbs down as far as they can. And then at the bottom, they just jumped down and I could catch them. Everyone apart from Druid, who could
easily succeed any acrobatics checks,
and just jumped on her own. Didn't fuss me. I'd get a last embrace before the end of the session. So, Druid is pushing through the dungeon. She feels like the de facto leader because she thinks she's the only one trustworthy enough to keep us alive. She's snappy and confrontational for the entire dungeon. Nothing new there. We push through to the end so we can stop hearing her bark at people. We come to a magical force field containing the weapon we need, being guarded by an elderly man whose eyes have been plucked from his head. We talk to him and try to figure out how to get past the force field. He talks in a confusing manner, and we are all a little stumped as to what to do. We look around for clues, and we notice that the other side of the force field is covered in bones. Nothing else. No armor, no weapons, no flesh. Just perfectly bleached bones. Someone throws a rock at the force field and it turns to dust. I pull out a javelin and force it into the force field. It turns the tip to dust. When we watch as a little rat scurries past us and tries to run through, it bursts into a little flash, and there's nothing but a tiny pile of bones on the other side. This, very clearly, straight up murders anyone that tries to cross it. Everything besides bone is turned into fine particles. Nobody has a plan, not even Druid. She starts to become agitated and tells the DM this puzzle is stupid. I suddenly had a flash of genius. Druid was really starting to push buttons among all the players. I've only highlighted some of her moments. There have been many smaller aggressions that have been built up and really ground down our group's dynamic. People are bored of having to argue just to put across their creativity and fight tooth and nail to be heard. I had the perfect plan to solve it. "Druid!" I yelled frantically. "I know how to get past this!" Everyone turned to me and waited on what sort of riddle I'd solved. I would like to warn everyone right now that I completely broke character for this entire scene. Usually I wouldn't, but if Druid was presented a plan by my character, it would have been shot down before my lips even moved. I had to get metagamey. I spoke to Druid player, and I proposed a theory. This force field reduces whatever passes through it to 0, but if she was in wild shape, she would hit 0 and revert back to her usual form at full hit points on the other side. Amazingly, she listened to me. Of all the plans she could have chosen to go along with, this should not have been the one she picked. She transformed into a horse, and she prepared to throw herself at this barrier. I told her that the best idea was to let me throw her at the barrier. Again, being a Goliath barbarian, it was doable. And amazingly, she put up a pretty small fight before agreeing that it would actually get her through quicker. So I threw her really, really hard. She died. Flash of light, clattering of bones, and she was gone. "How could you?" she screamed, glaring at the DM. She was brimming with rage. You could almost see the steam venting from her ears. "Hey, don't look at me. It was obvious. I literally told you that everything that passed through it turned to dust. I didn't throw you." And with that, she turned to me. There was fire in her eyes. Honestly, I don't even know what expressions were showing on my face at this moment. I was in complete disbelief that Druid had even heard me out, let alone went along with me. "I'm sorry, it was an accident," I stuttered, unsure of whether or not I should remove the cutlery from the table in front of her. The game concluded quickly, like right on the spot. We couldn't play for another second if her precious, overpowered, multi-talented, no ability lower than a 14, unthought-out, argumentative, fun-draining, and creativity-killing masterpiece wasn't there to rain misery over everyone. She was so in love with her character, because she spent such a huge amount of time fleshing her out and getting into the head of this glorious creation of hers. Everyone left pretty quickly. Druid first of all. She gave me a death stare as I slowly stood up and moved to the bathroom. She left while I was in there. I came back to a group of people brandished with smiles. We didn't talk much after that. We all understood how each other felt. Every game from then on went without a hitch, and without a druid. Druid was voted out by the rest of the group. We would have had her back, but she had told one of the other players about how she'd min-maxed her next character, and that she would have one of 6 different sheets, all of which were designed to directly kill my PC, like straight away, the second her new PC was introduced to our group. She even sent the sheets. She claimed they were all rolled and created completely fairly, no cheating. Yet over the 6 sheets, she didn't have a single ability below 13. I know D&D isn't all about rules and following them to the end, but I can't understand people who cheat their sheets just so they can push everyone out of the way and do everything by themselves. Just go play Skyrim. In short, if you are playing with a group of people in a cooperative game, don't be upset when people don't do everything you say. We are all telling a story together, not reading from your script. End of story. Oh man, this was a long one, but that payoff was worth it. And that ending, oh, I love that ending, that final sentence that we're not reading from your script, we're telling a story together. That right there embodies the spirit of D&D, and why so many problem players are problem players. I mean, so many railroading GMs and edgelord rogues would all just disappear overnight if we all ingrained that final sentence into our brains as a collective. Anyway, I appreciate you staying until the end. And if you stayed this far, I would appreciate it even more if you would like the video and subscribe. Comments are appreciated. They're always my favorite part about making these videos. I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.